A very good morning and good evening, or maybe a good afternoon to my dear friends and everyone who is attending this webinar. Before we start, I wish everyone who is attending this webinar a Merry Christmas and amidst the cheer and the spirit of Christmas. Today we have a webinar going live on a very special topic which is close to everyone's heart, to everyone's health. Perhaps it is utmost need for one's survival, and that is sleep. And that is why it is maybe called the capsule of energy. And to support and walk through this webinar, we have our excellent and eminent speakers, Dr. Jayaraman Thimmapuram and Dr. Anuj Chandra. So I would like to introduce both of them. Dr. Jayaraman Thimmapuram is internist. He is from York Hospital. Just a minute. I think I'll just get the slide on. Give me a second. Thank you. Thank you for the help. Yes. Dr. Jayaraman Timapuram is an academic hospitalist in internal medicine at Wellspan York Hospital. He has a very special interest in research and that too in the subject of sleep and has several articles published in various medical journals. He is a recipient of the Gold Humanism Award, Outstanding Teacher of the Year Award, and Resident of the Year Award. He has completed research projects on heartfulness meditation and its effect in lowering stress levels, burnout, improving sleep, and also on loneliness. He is also a TEDx speaker. Welcome, Dr. Jayaraman. We have our
Thank
next speaker, Dr. Anuj Chandra. Thank you, Dr. Anuj, for being with us. And I would like to introduce Dr. Anuj to all of you. He has practiced over 14 years in North Georgia, Chattanooga area. He has founded the Advanced Center for Sleep Medicine in 2005. He has become double boarded after receiving his second board certificate in sleep medicine. He has been quick to embrace promising technologies, including the variable positive airway pressure and adapt SV machine. We will talk about this with him later. He's creating a greater understanding of sleep disorders and health. Healthy sleep is his mission. He has been serving as a part. Just a second. Give me a second. It's not too clear. So I welcome both the speakers, and I now would like to go ahead. Maybe, of course, speaking is not maybe a word which I can use for this, but a healthy conversation on sleep. So going on to Dr. Anuj, what is sleep? And is it natural for all of us to sleep? Because all of us seem to be sleep deprived nowadays. So how natural is it for us to sleep, and what is sleep?
Absolutely. So thank you, and thank you for doing this. It's an excellent topic. It's very relevant, and it's taken a lot of effort on part of the team, both in organizing this. So I really laud everyone's efforts, and hopefully this is going to shed a lot of light for people who are joining in now, or even after this is recorded, they can listen in later. So basically, what we know is sleep is essential for life. So the three most important things to sustain life are uh, a good diet, exercise, and sleep. Without this, organisms will die. And there is extensive research in animals, and we also know from other medical conditions in which there is sleep deprivation that it ultimately is not compatible with life. And sleep is state where we are not unconscious, but there is a decreased level of consciousness where you're not as arousable. And but in the background, a lot of functions are taking place, and we know that from all the research which has taken place. So it's not as if the body is completely not doing anything. There's a lot of important functions which are going on, even though there is a decreased level of responsiveness and consciousness, especially depending on the stage of sleep. The muscles are much more relaxed, the body is relaxed, the brain waves are slower. So so that's in a nutshell. And yes, all living creatures need to sleep.
So, why is it that as human beings we do not want to sleep, or we want to sleep late, or we want to get up late? That's what we say. We really we don't follow the circadian rhythm. So, to talk more about the circadian rhythm, I would invite Dr. Jayaraman Timapuram to make us understand and lead us into this understanding of what is this rhythm all about, and why do we humans do not follow this rhythm, the biological rhythm, which is known as the circadian rhythm.
Thank you so much, Snehal, and thank you, Dr. Anuj, for being here. It's a pleasure being with all of you. And it is an excellent question, Snehal. There is an intrinsic rhythm of the body, and that intrinsic rhythm is inbuilt. And for most of the diurnal creatures, during the daytime, there is activity, there is a need to procure food, and as the day progresses and as the night sets in, it is natural for the diurnal organisms to sleep. And man is built in as a diurnal creature, right? Which means we are active during the daytime, and at night, the system is designed to rest, the system is designed to sleep. And it follows a cyclical pattern, and this is what the circadian rhythm is, or our internal biological clock. And there were very nice experiments that were done to see whether this biological clock is intrinsic. And when a group of experimenters or the scientists went into a dark area without being exposed to light, even then this rhythm persisted. And that rhythm consisted of around two-thirds of wake time in a 24-hour period and one-third of sleep time. So this is our intrinsic rhythm that is present in almost all of us. Right? When the day breaks, when there is sunlight, there is the sunlight that the eyes receive, and this signal is sent. There is a nucleus or a cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus and the light sensor, you can say. And as long as there is daylight, this sensor keeps us awake in a way that it tells the system, there is still sunlight, you can stay awake. And as the light goes down towards the evening, it sends a signal to the pineal gland saying that, what, it's getting dark outside, it's time to cool down, it's time to relax, it's time to sleep, right? And the pineal gland produces the melatonin, which is a hormone, and it helps us sleep. And this is one mechanism, and it's a very complex mechanism, but to simplify it, this is the whole underlying mechanism for sleep. Uh, and this circadian rhythm is something that we need to be in tune with. Anytime we are not in tune with the circadian rhythm, there is a friction in the physiological system of a human being. And that friction within the physiological system leads to many complications, including the physical, mental, emotional conditions that are not congenial for well-being of a human being. And as to why we choose to do it, I do not know, because human beings are the only ones who voluntarily sleep deprive ourselves. We are the only ones who put sleep as an optional element and not an essential element. And as long as we consider it as an optional, and as long as we think that sleep is something that can be pushed aside, we will continue to have problems that are related to circadian rhythm, and we will continue to have problems that are related to health and well being that are primarily triggered by imbalance of the circadian rhythm, which is predominantly due to not giving enough importance to sleep.
That's
Thank you.
exactly right. That's very well said. And what we are seeing is, as modern society is evolving, sleep is getting pushed aside, especially with the 24/7 society and all the digital influences that we have, whether it's TV or our digital devices, including phones. And it's coming with a huge upsurge in depression, anxiety, in teenage depression, suicide, obesity, diabetes, hypertension. And all these links have been proven with sleep deprivation. So, what Dr. J said is that we are the only living species which, think that sleep is expendable, and it's coming at a huge cost. So, that's so important, what he said.
I do resonate with both of you, friends, and I understand when I come from a background where I'm seeing a lot of kids who come to me with communication problems who are almost on the spectrum of autism. And when I look at, and also the children who have a lot of attention and hyperactivity issues. Now, these children, when I go into their history and I ask the families, how is their sleep pattern? In almost 80% of them, the sleep pattern is not established well, or they
Mhm.
show deficient sleep in the early infancy. So there's a lot of issue which we see in our families back home here, or even when I see them from the on an international background, that sleep becomes very important for a baby also. So do you want to say something on that, Dr. Anuj? How sleep evolves and how important it is even for younger children to sleep well, and what are the associated problems which we see in infancy and adulthood?
Oh, absolutely. So we do know that, from in infancy, children are sleeping at least 15, 16, 17 hours. Age 3 years onwards, it's 10 to 13 hours. So these are very, and we know 6 to 12 should be at least 9 to 12 hours. But we know across the world, and especially in the US, there have been actual studies done by the National Sleep Foundation, which they have shown as a society, majority, about 70% of children are sleep deprived. And then we see also an association, this whole rise in mental health problems and, obesity in children, and, early and metabolic disease. So this has been linked, really closely. Part of the problem is also there's a correlation with the advent of the digital society, and we've also become more sedentary. So it's all these things are linked, and it's coming at a huge cost, and it's just coming at a huge cost, and we don't seem to be able to put checks and balances in place to control this. So much as there is more research which is available which proves the fact, but it's a societal global problem with 10% of the world's population having insomnia. you know so, and part of it's also, some of it's self-induced, some of it's because of all these, the bright light exposure that we are having, which interferes with the melatonin release and these ingrained mechanisms. We are tampering with these natural biorhythms, and we are doing it ourselves, and it's coming at a huge cost, you know.
Thank you. Dr. Jay, do you want to add to this?
I would like to add a separate twist to what Dr. Anuj has said. It's not about the quantity of the sleep that is required. I totally agree with everything that Dr. Anuj had mentioned. But one thing that I wanted to add is it's not about the duration of sleep in kids But the way in which the kids are woken up in the morning, they when kids have to be woken up in the morning, it has to be very gentle. The reason I say that is when the body is under deep state of rest, when the body is in the deepest state of calmness, when the mind is in the deepest state of calmness, we should not yank the mind out of that state. We should try and see if we can bring it out in a slow, steady, gentle phase. When kids have to go to school, for instance, in the morning, right? And try and see if we can wake them up in a slow and steady fashion so that when they get awake, it's a natural transition from the deep state of rest to a state that they can function very well. And when we wake up in the morning, trying to use this jarring sounds is another thing that may not be very congenial. So, this little idea of transitioning in a gentle way. I mean, if we look at nature, the way day happens, it doesn't happen suddenly. It transitions from darkness to somewhat light to then brightness, right? In a similar way, sleep, when when it happens, when we wake up, if that transition can also be mimicked, it can help a lot, especially with kids. And there were some studies that were done when kids were offered a little bit extra sleep, when they were able to wake up more refreshed, even their school grades started to improve, their performance improved, their behavior improved. So maybe all that these kids need is that adequate sleep. And I totally agree with Dr. Anuj that kids need a little bit more sleep than adults. And if we try to wake them up too early, sometimes it becomes very difficult for the kids to manage at school. To a sleep deprived kid may not be able to pay much attention at school. They may not be able to sit very still. And if they're unable to pay attention, if they're unable to sit still, often these are the symptoms that are sometimes associated with ADHD, for instance. I'm not saying that ADHD is not a diagnosis, but some of the sleep deprivation symptoms can mimic this. And maybe all that this kid needs is a good night's sleep. Why not provide that good night's sleep? So that's one small addition to what Dr. Anuj had said in a very beautiful and eloquent way.
Wonderful. That's a good, healthy practice what you have introduced, Dr. Jay. Coming back to Dr. Anuj, I would like to. He just spoke of the brain function during sleep, and many a times when we come back home, sometimes worried, sometimes stressed, something has gone wrong, and there's a very nice way of saying that just sleep over it, go to sleep, and you will feel better. So, how true is this, and what happens? What actually happens when we go to that restful sleep and when we wake up and we find that, oh wow, I'm feeling much better than what I was before I went to sleep. So, Dr. Anuj, can you elaborate on this?
Yes, absolutely. So we have more and more scientific data that when we are sleeping, especially in dream sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, memory consolidations going on, learning is going on. And there have been all these anecdotes of famous scientists who found these formulas like the DNA, the double helix. Watson and Crick. I think one of them thought of it it came to him in his sleep. So it's a very active time. When we are in deep sleep, growth hormone in stage 3 sleep, growth hormone secretion takes place. It's the hormone of rejuvenation, muscle recovery. So, yeah, so it's absolutely true. A healthy night's sleep, it'll give you a different perspective. So if you're really weighed down with this problem and you're just overwhelmed with it, if you're able to sleep over it, then you will be able to process and look at other dimensions also of how to address that. So, and they have shown that, multiple experiments, studies, that when students in, college, they're learning and their performance was much better if they were, taught, and then they were allowed to get dream sleep, and then they were tested. So we absolutely know this, and we really need to actively in forums like this continue to educate the entire world population as to we, consciously need to be, doing this. What you said is worth $1 million. It's like, okay, I'm going to disconnect from, this problem. I've got this problem list for the day, but I'm going to disconnect now. I'll deal with it tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's another day. And lo behold, so many solutions and new paths and new ways of looking at it open up, you know but we forget that. We get so intertwined with that day's happening and the stress that we take it to bed rather than disconnecting, and our sleep is poor, and then the next day we are actually worse off. So, and that's why as we segue into the benefits of meditation and heartfulness meditation, that really comes in as to how, what a huge impact it can have on our lives, and then all our immediate family and our work lives, the people we interact with, if we are in a, happier, a demeanor and a happier sense of functioning. Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Dr. Jay, do you want to add on since Dr. Anuj mentioned about heartfulness methods? And does heartfulness practice really affect sleep in any way? Have you done any studies regarding this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for those interesting points that you have mentioned, Dr. Anuj. With regards to the previous question on stress and how sleep helps with stress, right? Dr. Anuj had initially mentioned about the brain waves slowing down during sleep, right? And there are stages of sleep, and the slow wave sleep is one of the deepest states of sleep that we can get, right? And something magical happens when the brain waves are very slow. We call it delta waves or the slow wave sleep, right? The fluid around the brain called the cerebrospinal fluid. And the brain doesn't have lymphatic system, but it has something similar. It's the glymphatic system, and it's almost like the plumbing system within the brain, right? This fluid flows through this glymphatic system and clears up all the toxins
Yes.
that are built up during the daytime, right? And some of these proteins that are built up, they are amyloid beta and tau proteins, which are implicated in conditions such as Alzheimer's disease and things like that. So the reason I bring this up is sleep is a magical phenomenon where whatever stresses and strains we have accumulated during the daytime, right? A good night's sleep is a very good antidote to get rid of those stresses and strains. And heartfulness practices are, to me, a way each and every practice of heartfulness can facilitate a good night's sleep. And we have conducted some studies on our patients, on our physicians and advanced practice providers, and our resident physicians who are very dear to my heart. And what we have offered them is a simple practice of heartfulness meditation to see what it does to their sleep. When we offered this to patients with chronic insomnia, and imagine not being able to sleep well for at least 3 nights a week, and this goes on for a long period of time, right? Call it chronic insomnia. And often these patients are not, they feel groggy, and each and every aspect of their living is affected because of poor sleep. And we have taken a group of these patients and we offered them 8 weeks of heartfulness meditation practice. And we measured their insomnia severity index scores at the beginning and towards the end. We saw that their scores have improved from a mean score of 20.9 to a score of 10.4, and more than a 10-point drop. And the results were statistically significant and clinically meaningful as well. Uh, More interestingly, a lot of these patients were on sleeping aids, and at the end of the study, with the support of on and the supervision of the sleep specialist, we were able to wean off, and 75% of them were able to come off of their sleeping pills. And to me, I would only advocate it under supervision. I would not advocate it without supervision of a sleep specialist. And I do not know whether they went back on them eventually, but at least it gives us hope that there are certain practices that we can do that can help with our well being. And the other study that we have done is on resident physicians to see what happens to their sleep quality and their restfulness, and how long it took for them to fall asleep, and how long were they sleeping, and their sleep efficiency. So these were some of the things that we measured in our resident physicians. We offered heartfulness practices for 1 week, and we compared it with a week where we did not offer heartfulness meditation. And we tracked it with consensus sleep diary, and we also used actigraphy watches to see how their sleep was affected with practices of heartfulness. We saw that their onset of sleep was much quicker, from an average of around 21 minutes without heartfulness meditation to around close to 14 and a half minutes with heartfulness meditative practices. And their quality of sleep, restfulness, and sleep efficiency, all of them improved with statistical significance. And this is also a study that we published in the Annals of Neurosciences. There was another study that we have conducted looking at loneliness and sleep. What we did was we offered 4 weeks of heartfulness meditation practice to physicians and advanced practice providers in our healthcare system. And we measured their loneliness and sleep at the beginning and towards the end. There were two groups, a control group and an intervention group. The control group did not show any changes, but the intervention group that followed heartfulness meditative practices, we saw an improvement in both loneliness and sleep. And when our colleagues asked me, Dr. J, how do you think this works? And I told them a very simple answer: a well rested mind will be able to socialize well. A poorly rested mind would want to isolate itself. It doesn't want to socialize. I mean, take a night when you have had a good night's sleep. You're a better person, right? You'd want to be around with people. You talk well. You interact with others in a better way. And take a night when you have not slept well. People don't want to come near you. They want to run away from you. You're grumpy and groggy, right? It's a common experience, right? So when we offer this rest for the mind, the deep state of rest that our system craves for, and these practices of heartfulness meditation offer that fundamental requirement of the human system. And not only it offers that deepest state of rest, but it also offers that direction and inner guidance that can help with leading our life in a proper in a way that is congenial for our own well-being and the well-being of others too. So these are some of the studies that we have done.
Wonderful information, Dr. Jai. And dear friends, we are talking on a phenomena called sleep, where we spend almost one third of our life as human beings. That's what we do. That's great statistics. And Dr. Anuj, I would like to understand that this problem of global sleep deprivation, they say that it is causing more damage than terrorism. So, is that true again? And if
Oh,
that is true, why? Why is it said? Why is it, it is causing so much of damage? Is Alzheimer's end result because of all this? Are there any more problems which you can cite which are going in sync with this problem which we are seeing?
oh, absolutely. And not to undermine, we are all in the midst of a global pandemic with COVID, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. But for the longest, we've been in a global pandemic of sleep deprivation, and that's self-inflicted, because as our societies have evolved and modern life has come to be, 24/7 society has become like the norm, and it's becoming more acceptable. And as I even mentioned earlier, and there is so much proof, whether it's people who do shift work, they have signs of depression. They have signs of metabolic disease. They'll develop diabetes. There's higher cancer risk. That's been well proven. It's considered a precancerous condition to do shift work. And so many people, including doctors, we are doing shift work all the time for a long part of our life, and it's coming at a huge cost, and it leads to mental health problems and also physiological problems. And and if you go back to the you know old ways where we respected a circadian rhythm, people would get up at the crack of dawn. It was our grandparents, and they would just have this routine that they would follow, and at night they would go to sleep. Much as we can't go back to that simple life of living on the farm, but it had huge advantages. If you look at mental health and wellness, we didn't have all these issues that we have now. And it's all over the world because we are pushing these natural biorhythms to the limits. We are pushing them, and we are at a breaking point. But I am hopeful that at least I'm sure with Dr. J and other and also in India now there are all these devices, so we get a lot of patients. They're getting more conscious and aware of this, and they say, I check my sleep on my Apple Watch or my digital on my whichever for my watches, and there are all these apps which are available, and they're saying, oh, I'm not getting deep sleep, I'm not getting REM sleep. So you really have a conversation and see what are your lifestyle choices, and it's usually they're in bed with their phone, reading, texting right to the minute that they're going to sleep. So and again, just to go back to what Dr. J said, that evidence is there. With meditation, there's so much research which is there. I just suggest that to all the listeners who are tuning in, just Google mindfulness and sleep disorders as to how mindfulness is the Western term for meditation, but there is so much data as to how it is so helpful for the body that I think it really needs to be just made into a part of the school routine, and into our daily lives. We need to and it's very much part of the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, where it's a very strong pillar of cognitive behavioral therapy, just like what Dr. J said, even in his research and studies. But there is data for the last 15, 20 years which is very solid, that we can wean people off these sleep medications by implementing cognitive behavioral therapy and meditation and mindfulness as part of it, you see.
Thank
So
you.
yeah.
That was great information. So there is something what we were talking about, the stages of sleep in one of the conversations we were having. And people who come to us, the children who come to us, the adults sometimes who come to us, come saying that some of them have problems in falling asleep. Some of them have problems in retaining the quality of sleep. Some of them get up very often. They have disturbed sleep. So, what are the different types of sleep disorders, Dr. Anuj and Dr. Jay? How do we deal with them?
Yeah, sure. So, believe it or not, there's almost 83 classified sleep disorders. And insomnia is a huge one, with 10% of the global population having insomnia. So, you can imagine how many billion people. And that's defined as chronically having either trouble falling asleep and or staying asleep, or even both. So, and the other big ones is sleep apnea, where people snore, they'll have noisy breathing. For the most part, there are some where they won't, like central sleep apnea, they'll just have silent pauses. That's not as common. But we have an epidemic of sleep apnea, both and across the world, whether it's in the developed world or in the developing world, as in India. And we know it's highly prevalent. It leads to strokes, heart disease, diabetes, or there's links with neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's, also Alzheimer's. A lot of people are overweight, and it's lifestyle choices, but not everybody. So and so these are potentially life-threatening conditions, um, and some of it's also genetics has got a part to do with it. A lot of it's also lifestyle choices, and as societies, people have put on weight. There's been an exponential increase of sleep apnea, and that's a lot of work that me and Dr. J do, and it's a life-threatening condition. And there's several others like restless leg syndrome, and prevalence in India is quite high, and the Western world is very high, and it can be because of again low iron, which could be because of poor diet, and a lot of times it's genetic. And the quality of life with restless leg has been multiple studies to be shown to be as poor as somebody who's undergoing cancer chemotherapy. But I'll let Dr. J now speak about any others and his experience.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Anuj. I think you covered majority of the issues where it can interfere with sleep. And these health conditions need to be addressed for us to have a good night's sleep. For example, patients with sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, right? Uh, when they wake up in the morning, they still feel very groggy. There is daytime sleepiness, somnolence, and even the consequences such as of driving, for instance, there is increased risk of having road traffic accidents with sleep apnea, and this is particularly prevalent in patients with higher BMI and with a thicker neck, the collar size that is on the higher side, right? So, if there are physical reasons for having sleep problems that need to be addressed in a way that is appropriate, as Dr. Anuj had mentioned, if someone has sleep apnea, we need to treat them the underlying sleep apnea to improve their sleep, whether it is through a CPAP machine or any other intervention that is uh, appropriate, whether it is a jaw advancing device or a weight loss and weight reduction. So these need to be addressed. But one of the things that I also wanted to point out is on an emotional level. When we go through many emotional ups and downs during the daytime, there are many emotional files that we go through, right? And these do interfere with our sleep. Imagine having a bad day. Can you fall asleep easily on that on when you go to bed? It's not easy, right? And even if you fall asleep, do you have a good night's sleep? You'll keep waking up, right? So our inner emotional life plays a very significant role in the quality of sleep, the duration of sleep, and also the time for us to fall asleep, how many times we wake up. These are all interrelated. The way I look at it is this. There is an office assistant within each one of us, right? And this office assistant keeps a track of all the emotional files that we go through during the daytime. Some of them we process them, and some of them we do not process them. We just push them under the carpet or put it in a cabinet and close it, right? When we go to sleep, this office assistant goes through each and every file and picks up the files that we have not processed, wakes up in the middle of the night and says, "You have not processed this emotional file. What do you want to do with it?" Right? So before we go to bed, it is important to address these files or at least acknowledge that these files exist, right? And my research interest being heartfulness, right? uh, we have offered this to our patients, and this is what I mentioned to them. When we go through many emotional turbulences during the daytime, these emotional sediments settle within ourselves, right? And when the day is over, there is a practice of heartfulness called rejuvenation, where we sit down, close our eyes, and make a suggestion that all these complexities and impurities, the stresses and strains and anxieties, the heaviness that we built up within the system is leaving us in the form of smoke or vapor from the back, top down to the tailbone, the shoulder blades, and the entire back. Sit with this idea for about 15 minutes or so, at the end of which we feel a bit lighter. When we feel lighter, make a suggestion that There is a flow of lightness, purity, freshness entering your heart, slowly filling your whole system, oozing out through each and every cell of your being. It is almost as if we are giving an opportunity for the system to wipe out the emotional sediment at the end of the day. And having said that, it is also important to learn from the emotional turbulences that we have gone through and become a better version of ourselves the next day. And before going to bed, look at the day's events, scan the day's events. There are many areas that we have messed up that we need to work on, right? Acknowledge the areas that we need to work on. And with this, we have informed our office assistant that, you know what, I know these are the areas that I messed up, and I know I need to work on this, and I will work on these things, right? Now the office assistant knows that this guy is already aware of. There's no point in waking this guy up, right? So I get a good night's sleep. So this is one way of looking at the sleep from an emotional point of view. And there are many studies that were done where patients with sleep problems, they are very sensitive to emotional turbulences. And it is a vicious cycle. Emotional turbulences can lead to a poor night's sleep, and a consecutive poor night's sleep for a prolonged period where we have sleep problems, it can also make us more sensitive to emotional turbulences in life. So it needs to be broken at some point, and the practices of heartfulness, especially the rejuvenation technique and the technique before bedtime, can play a very significant role in how we sleep, the quality of sleep, the restfulness that we get. So this is what I wanted to share. The same things that I shared with my patients.
Thank you, Dr. Jay. Dr. Anuj, there's something what happens, and even some patients who come to us also say that, my sleep is disturbed, but at the same time during the day I feel sleepy. I just fall asleep. Is it normal to fall asleep during the day? And do power naps help? And some term which I heard in a narcolepsy or something.
Yeah.
What is it? I mean, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So the need for naps should really go away after age 6 or so. And if somebody's feeling consistently the need to take naps, then it's probably in a large majority coming from poor sleep at night. And then again, and that's called sleep hygiene. So if you sleep during the day, then your nighttime sleep is going to be much worse. So these power naps can be helpful in people, like, if you're on a project, you're working on something and you just can't, you are forced to be sleep deprived, you have something major project, then you can just take a 15-20 minute power nap, but it's not going to substitute for your nighttime sleep, which you should be getting. So Dr. Snehal, and so this is hypersomnia. This is a problem, and it's either coming from a medical cause, it's coming from either self-inflicted sleep deprivation, and then this needs to be addressed. If you're constantly having to feel the need to take naps in the day, is abnormal. There are medical conditions like narcolepsy, and which people will have disturbed nighttime sleep, but they'll feel an irresistible urge to nap during the day, and short naps can be refreshing. So there is certain genetic markers, for this. It's not a common condition, but it has a huge societal impact in the people who have it. And so that needs to be addressed. So whoever's listening in, that if you're constantly having to feel the need to take naps, that is, as an adult, is absolutely abnormal. And there's something going on which needs to be addressed. Either, again, to repeat, you're not sleeping well at night, there's a medical cause like sleep apnea, or it's self-inflicted sleep deprivation that we've been talking about, which is a huge societal problem. Or it could be, a condition like narcolepsy, which is, so this needs to be addressed. That's the main take home from this, that if you're feeling the need to take naps. Dr. Jay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Jay, your comments on this?
No, I agree with Dr. Anuj. Um, there is a term that I like to bring up. It's called the sleep pressure. Right? As we stay, one of the fundamental determinants of anyone falling asleep is the pressure that builds up to sleep, right? And one of the fundamental determinants of that is how long we have been awake. And as we are awake, there are many things that happen within the system, including buildup of certain chemicals within the brain, um, called adenosine, right? And as this adenosine builds up within the brain, it's almost like the bricks piling up, right? We can only take in so much, right? And when there is enough buildup of this, it puts us to sleep. And during sleep, these bricks are slowly cleared up and we wake up, right? But if we are feeling sleepy during the daytime, it only means that there are still a lot of bricks that are piling up that have not been cleared. It is an indication, as Dr. Anuj had mentioned, that the sleep quality or duration or both have not been great overnight. Right? And it should trigger um, a, a suspicion that it needs to be checked out. So undue sleepiness during the daytime is something that most of the patients come with to the sleep specialist, and so and often they are found to have, whether it is obstructive sleep apnea or some other condition that may be triggering this, and these can be addressed. So I would recommend, as Dr. Anuj said, if something is abnormal, if you are feeling unduly sleepy during the daytime, then it is something that needs to be addressed. And a power nap in situations where it is needed is not bad, but it should not be a habit, because when we clear up the sleep pressure with a nap, it interferes with us falling asleep at night. Right? Imagine having a good night's sleep during the daytime, right? There's only so much we can do. And at night, there is no pressure for us to fall asleep. So it can interfere with falling asleep at night. And there is another issue that I often encounter with patients sometimes when they meditate with me, Dr. J. I don't know if I have fallen asleep during meditation when I meditate with them. And I tell them, it is possible to fall asleep during meditation if you are sleep deprived. If there is a lot of sleep pressure, anytime you give rest for the body, it can uh, put you to sleep because there is so much sleep pressure within, right? And it's not a bad thing. At least you're giving an opportunity to clear up that sleep pressure, but don't clear it up too much to an extent that it would interfere with your night sleep.
Thank you, Dr. Jay. Before we go on to our healthy habits for sleep, a few questions which are there on the chat box if you all would like to check up. There's an interesting question is about revenge bedtime procrastination. Why does it happen?
So,
And this.
yeah, what this is, if I'm getting it right, and Sarojini, thank you for joining in. It is, just what Dr. J said right in the beginning, is human beings, we are ones who consciously tend to tinker with this natural biorhythm. So we are able to consciously push our sleep away. So it's like, as we are falling asleep, okay, let me do this. Let me also send off one more text. And so we are able to consciously push our sleep, further back and further back. But so this is, it's basically very, very bad for our body. A lot of us do it just because our lives are very busy and we haven't finished all the tasks for the day. So this is just to understand what Sarojini is saying about revenge procrastination, is that you're just trying to without realizing it, just procrastinating your sleep, and it's actually vengeful for the body. So, Dr. J, what do you think?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add. You have said it very nicely, Dr. Anuj.
Yeah. So, and this is a common phenomena. All of us are guilty of it, and we need to, on forums like this, bring this up and say, okay, 11 o'clock is my cutoff. Whatever happens, the world's going to end. I'm just going to switch off. This is the time. I just have to. This is my schedule. I will deal with this problem in the morning. Much is right now. It's overwhelming me, but it'll be better tomorrow. So we, all of us, as consciously have to, make that attempt to be very strict with our routines and say, okay, yes, it's a huge problem, and have all these things to do. I'm behind on all these tasks, but I'm going to cut off. This is my time. So that's the way
And
to deal with this revenge procrastination.
another interesting question, and which is a common problem which people face, is snoring and how to get rid of snoring.
Yes, that's a very, very important question. And this brings us to the whole prevalence of sleep apnea. Not everybody who snores has sleep apnea, but if you're consistently snoring, you're tired in the daytime, then this definitely needs to be addressed. And lot of things go into this. Weight has a huge part. As we get older, the upper airway musculature tends to get laxer. There is studies, well done studies from England, the Didgeridoo study, where they were playing the Didgeridoo instrument, and their sleep apnea improved with practice of this instrument. Similarly, with pranayam, there is data that could improve this. But snoring needs to be addressed. It's got multiple reasons, from weight to reflux to what time you ate your last meal, to you know also family history, and it can be a sign of a potentially serious condition called sleep apnea, which can cause heart attacks, strokes. So that definitely needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Dr. J?
And one uh, addition, I used to work with one of the sleep specialists when I was in England. Uh, and the way he used to talk to his patients was very interesting. He would talk to the bed partner,
Yes.
and he would talk to the bed partner and say, describe how your partner sleeps.
Mhm.
And that gives a lot of information, right? And he would say, apart from snoring, do you feel that your partner stops breathing for some time and then starts taking in as if after a pause? So this is one of the things that he would emphasize, right? So it is not only about snoring, but also the periods when the partner stops breathing for a short period of time. If there is someone who's there with you when you're sleeping, who can observe you, who has been observing you, it would be good to take them along with you when you go and see a sleep specialist to give more description of your sleep patterns, so that an appropriate diagnosis and an appropriate treatment can be offered.
You brought out this wonderful term about sleep specialists, and in India also we have a lot of integrated sleep clinics, multidisciplinary sleep clinics. Any thoughts on that, Dr. Anuj?
Yes, absolutely. And, that needs to be integrated, whether it's with your cardiology practice, whether it's with pediatrics. It's so important. And or also internal medicine or general medicine, because that's where the patients are going to come and say that, and so that needs to be actually part of your general screening when a patient is, comes to you and they're complaining of fatigue and tiredness, and even otherwise, as to do you snore, what disturbs your sleep, does your spouse snore, and tell us, just like Dr. J was saying, what the sleep habits are. So a sleep history is essential for any kind of medical evaluation at the onset when you first meet the patient. Also for pediatrics, it's very, very important, because we are treating children for emotional issues, for attention deficit, for ADD and ADHD, and without addressing the sleep problem, and that could be the cause of this. So the integrative, where you have a sleep specialist that you can reach out to, or the pediatrician has some sleep training, and now this is becoming very much part of the medical college, medical school curriculum. In the past, it was not, but and we lost out on so many decades of this knowledge and its importance. But now, it is, and so it's definitely the integrated approach with addressing sleep issues, whether you're a cardiologist, whether you're doing an endocrinology or treating diabetes and thyroid problems. It's very, very important.
Thank you. And one last question before we go. I think we should have a second episode for this particular subject because there's so much to discuss, and definitely it's a global problem which we are all seeing. So, one last question is, what is the role sleep plays in the evolution of consciousness?
Dr. J, do you want to go first, and then I'll.
There are many ways in which consciousness can be defined, right? And one simple definition that comes to me is the degree of awareness, right? For example, consciousness can be defined as a field in which there are three things that play a role. One is the mind, the intellect, and the ego, right? And if we take these three into consideration, mind is all about thinking, intellect is about making choices, good choices versus not so good choices, and ego is the perception of the individual, the relationship that we have with our own selves, right? It's a uh, final decision maker, you can say, right? And all these three can be affected by sleep. For example, our thinking can be clearly affected when we don't sleep very well, right? And if we are able to regulate our sleep, we can help facilitate a proper thinking process and regulate our mind. As a meditator, I can say that when we have a good night's sleep, the morning meditation session is of a different quality. The way in which the state of the mind is, it's much better. And the ability to rest, the ability to focus, the ability to settle down into a deeper state increases by many folds after a good night's sleep. And it is a known fact that when it comes to intellect or when it comes to making choices, sleep plays a big role. Poor sleep makes us susceptible to poor choices, right? And the ability to make a good choice depends on the quality of sleep and the rest that we receive. For example, a simple study where participants were given equal amounts of food, and one group was sleep deprived and the other group received good night's sleep, right? If we look at the calories that were consumed and the type of choices of food that these two groups had, there was a clear difference. The group that was sleep deprived opted for more calories and also a higher carbohydrate rich food, the cookies and the candies and brownies, right? The, the ability to restrain oneself, the self restraint comes into picture with a good night's sleep. And the relationship that we have with our own selves also depend on the quality of sleep that we get. So all these elements of the mind, intellect, and the ego, they're all dependent on the quality of sleep that we get. And if we move a little further, sleep is the time when all these three elements in the field of consciousness are refined, rested, and it can help us become a better version of ourselves in combination with practices such as meditation that can not only refine these elements but also take it to the next dimension, which is much higher than the current level of our day to day living.
Thank you, Dr. Jai. So, with this wonderful message that we have to take care of our sleep and we have to sort of build a society which sleeps well with healthy sleep habits, we look forward to another webinar in near future on healthy sleep habits and also use of technology to aid sleep and also to investigate sleep. So the final message is rest, reset, rewind, and rejuvenate. Thank you, friends, for joining us on this webinar and looking forward to your suggestions and feedback. Thank you, Dr. Jay and Dr. Anuj, for hand holding us into this subject and giving us a deeper meaning on sleep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.